It's that one's on.
I think
The light's not
we
on.
have a middle camera working here. I want to welcome everybody to California Times. My name is Guy Meyer. And this is another exciting show here, I can tell from the get-go. I'm here with Pat Ravasio, who is coming up from Corte Madera to join me today, and Cheryl Scheuer, who has
Dr. Cheryl.
Dr. Cheryl. Cheryl has a TV show here at the Community Media Center called Waking Up with Dr. Cheryl.
Wake up, yeah.
And Pat has written a book, I guess maybe a little while ago already, called The Girl from Spaceship Earth.
Yes, sir.
Which sounds great. You know, just from the title, I
thank
can
you.
tell it's got something to it. And it's sort of a kind of a just happening kind of experience today, just as a background for this show, where Pat, I think on the spur of the moment, has come down here, and Cheryl has sort of been lassoed into this event. So this is, you know,
There are no random accidents. We're all here for a reason.
It's spontaneous
All right.
combustion.
All right, we are going to go for a little combustion, maybe just a nice little flame. Tony, can see if we can keep it rolling here. So let's start with Pat here. Pat, let's go right for your book. Tell me about your book. How long has it been published, and then go tell me about it.
I published it a little over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I did self-publish the book because on the morning after Donald Trump was elected president, I woke up with this great revelation that I had to get it out there as soon as possible. So I decided to self-publish it. I wasn't going to wait to get an agent, to get a publisher, which was going to take 2 to 3 years. I decided to just go for it. And within 7 months, I had published a really beautiful book thanks to amazing serendipitous forces of the universe. People just came to help me edit and publish it, and it's turned out to be a great book. It's got good reviews, and what it does is it brings back some of the lost wisdom of Buckminster Fuller, who Steve Jobs called many times the Leonardo da Vinci of the 20th century, because he left behind this huge amount of paper about everything. His goal when he was 32 years old and saved himself from suicide, long story in the book, but he made a deal that he would let himself live if he woke up every day and gave his total life over to the service of humanity. What could he do for the greater good? And he decided that that task that he needed to do was the best thing he could do for mankind would be to decipher the laws of nature and the design principles of nature. How does nature design? And the result of that, his best metaphor, it's a very complicated science called synergetic geometry, but the crowning achievement of that was the design of the geodesic dome. And his idea back way in the 30s was, this is how nature designs. When nature is working at her best, she thinks in spheres. And he would use the dandelion as an example. And it wasn't until the 80s with electron microscopes that they looked and they found viruses and all these nanoparticles in nature that were all designed in spheres. So it gets a little out there in terms of its overall impact, and sort of there's some metaphysical things going on in it. But what's happening now is more and more scientists and mathematicians are sort of catching up to where Bucky was, and they're starting to understand synergetic geometry and what it means.
Amen.
Pat, we were talking briefly before over the internet this morning, and you mentioned sort of like that we were circling the drain as a human species, kind of going down a vortex that. But you held out something too in a quote by him, and now I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh,
So what he said in 1982, a lot of the book is based on interviews I had with him in 1982. I was 24 years old, and I had given up my journalism career because there was no money in it. And I'd sold my soul and gone to work in advertising in Chicago. And I phoned him up. I interviewed him for a couple days. And what he told me was he was going to give me, and I always sound crazy when I say this, he told me he was going to give me his urgent messages for humanity and that it was going to be my job to pass them on, but that he didn't think the world would be ready to hear them for 50 years. So we're at 35 or 37, so I'm pushing it.
It's okay.
But
Yeah,
he thinks that we're evolving to where we'll be more ready to hear his messages. So now I've written the book, I'm just going to keep pushing it, and I'm doing a couple of other books. I'm doing a children's version of the book. They've asked, a couple of people have asked for that.
Well, that's good because I need to learn from
before they get untaught.
So I think of Buckminster Fuller, and I grew up with a dad who sort of, I think, maybe worshipped him a bit and was full of Buckminster Fuller's utopian optimism. And I think what Fuller might have been, but I'm naive. I haven't read anything. But maybe I glanced at his books when I was in college. I don't even remember. I must have, but who knows? So these underlying design that he believed he could access, that humanity could access, that provided integrity for, like, the structures of humans. Was he implying something still? Is that something that we're still looking to find ourselves, this underlying
So I think
design?
the best framework that makes it all come together for me is that he said we were not any longer in alignment with nature, that our dependence on fossil fuels was an over-specialization of us, and over-specialization causes extinction, and that we needed to understand what nature's rules were. And there's been some great progress. I don't know if you know the movie about Lynn Margolis and the biosphere of Earth and how we really are, the entire planet, Spaceship Earth, is really an organic cell. And humans are having an impact on that is not good, obviously. And what he said was, we must realign ourselves with nature. And that means abiding by nature's rules. And that means if we understand her design principles and we start working within them, we will become part of nature. And she won't, and his famous line, kick us off like a bad case of fleas. And which is what we're now asking for. You know, the waves, the floods, the storms are all saying, wait, you humans, this carbon is too much. And
It isn't just carbon, it's all the chemicals that we're being sprayed with. And
I really want to help you with that. I'm going to get back into journalism, and we're going to fight that. I mean, I haven't been writing.
Fighting it through my friend that's in D.C.
I've got some good friends in journalism.
Let's give the audience a little backstory of what you're referring to here now. What are you
The
referring to?
geoengineering, and they call it chemtrails. And I don't like to say chemtrails because it's, you know,
They think you're going to put on an aluminum foil hat.
Well, no, they you know, conspiracy theory, and it's not a conspiracy theory.
It's
It is
not. I agree.
real.
I've
it's
done a lot of reading.
factual. It is proven. I've proven it by having the rainwater in Mill
HAARP
Valley.
actually is a program. HAARP was a program started back in the first Bush years about could we alter the environment up here in the atmosphere to give us some kind of blanket to protect us from the heat of the sun. And it's the most crazy thing ever because they're all explosive chemicals. And I see these fires in California, and okay, I'm going to start sounding like a nut.
Well,
But-
the chemtrails are actually, you know, you see
Making
the
the fires
long-
worse.
Well, let me go through this.
I'm sorry.
The chemtrails are the big billowing trails behind the jets. And I'd say 99% of the jets have that jet stream going behind them. I've been down in San Jose and I've seen probably 10 or more crisscrossing.
Don't you see that?
And I see it here in Marin going, to going over San Francisco in a horseshoe.
And there was
They
a talk
go
on
and it-
NPR. There was a talk on NPR about this just this week, and they were saying a regular airplane with a regular mission, it does leave a trail, but it disappears right away.
It's a contrail. That is a contrail, and
Exactly.
it dissipates. I mean, I am very well read on this.
Right. So these chemtrails, she's
Seven-
right.
they're
They're
like
staying in the
15
atmosphere.
15 to 30 seconds long. The chemtrails last for 30 minutes or
So
even longer.
Tell them about your test.
So-
the test you did.
Okay.
Get there.
So I have been getting educated about this way over than what I really want to know, because the reality is very stark. Because this is, well, I've been working with Jolie to get the legislation for this, to ban geoengineering. And the first state, and I'll go into more detail, the first state was Rhode Island. And it's 4584 is the bill.
First state to
Yeah,
do
they're
what?
to get it into Congress.
They're banning it?
No, it didn't pass. So we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing. Europe, there's parts of Europe that don't allow geoengineering, like France and Germany don't allow it because it contaminates the soil, the air, the water. They're spraying aluminum, barium, strontium, sulfur nitrate, and then also silver iodide, which silver iodide they use to create fires.
Okay,
Okay.
let me, I'll start throwing in some questions here. I guess I'm going to take the viewpoint of a person who doesn't actually truly believe this yet, or I'm listening, and I've looked a little bit, and I haven't quite seen it, my own observations. And I guess let's just say that I am the person who is part of humanity that wants to be convinced of this. So when you say they, has that been identified who they are that is doing this?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's
Who's
a
they?
history of the military to modify the weather. That's their approach, is to modify the weather. The military have been doing it since the 40s. But then Monsanto got on board with this, no pun intended. But they're the ones, they want to control the weather because they make money. It all comes down to money with Monsanto. They make money whether there's too much or not enough water. But there's a bigger picture in this, which I have a hard time believing, but now I believe it. And it's, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds own PG&E.
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, not a good point.
PG&E.
I mean, I don't know if it's a good point or not, but it's a point, and it's.
And
I think a lot of people.
You're
PG&E
gonna
has
think
been
I'm a little crazy, but
Well,
this
think
is
most
not
everybody's
crazy.
a little crazy. That's okay. So.
You have to be to survive.
there you
All
go.
truth
The-
begins with
the-
something that sounds
And
crazy.
I am only telling the truth
Okay.
from what I have had
Okay.
proven.
Okay.
Now, as far as the chemicals that are being sprayed,
Yeah.
I collected last year. I collected the rainwater, and I did it. I looked it up to make sure that I did it the pristine, perfect way, so there wouldn't be any contamination. I saved the rainwater in a glass, pristine, clean glass container, sent it to the lab, and it came back with aluminum, barium, strontium, sulfur nitrate.
Wow.
Jolie says that there's silver iodide in there, and that's what starts fires. And look what
Do we-
happened.
Is this a lab? Can I see this report next
Oh,
time
yes,
or whatever?
yes,
And just
yes.
try to make.
I
and
would-
is it okay?
Absolutely.
And do they give you kind of a
The
description
percentage.
of
Oh
the
yeah.
percentages of
Oh totally.
all
They
the
have
stuff?
they have what is okay. What
Parts
is-
per million allowed
You
without.
know, and it's way over. It's way over. So Jolie has tests from all over the states.
And who was Jolie?
Jolie Diane, she's actually from here.
So can I just interject
sure.
one point that I really want
Go
to
for
make
it.
here?
Yeah.
Is I believe these efforts are well intentioned. I don't think they're trying to kill us off.
I
think they
do.
really are trying to control temperature rise and control. They're trying to
See,
make
I-
it rain
I-
in the plains to
I
support
don't believe it.
agriculture. I think there were initially, at least, some good intentions with this program.
Maybe
but that doesn't
initially.
mean I've been to conferences and listened to speakers who know what they're talking about say the fact is there's no way we can control what we're doing. We're being stupid to think that we can throw these chemicals into the atmosphere and that we know they're going to create a blanket from the sun and that's going to be okay. And the
No.
likelihood of
Well,
it being going
it's hard to
haywire.
imagine that there. To me, it's hard to imagine that there is a. You say it's a group, even if it's well intentioned. It's a, I guess that would get into something like whatever the Illuminati is. A group formed in secret
It's
without
just the
talking.
military.
I'm
Or is
sorry.
it-
I think that that's naive what you're saying, because I have researched this.
What I'm saying. Yes.
Because it comes from the top. Why now? Even the San Bruno fire that was a couple years ago.
Big gas
PG&E, and there's manipulation in this, and
They're
since
always trying to defend themselves or to
Absolutely,
deflect
and
responsibility
so-
from any of the issues.
right,
But-
right.
So
But my concern is the big picture. Why is this continuing to happen, especially to California? And in reality, they're trying to depopulate. I know that's harsh. I didn't want to believe it, and that's why I had the water tested.
I'm not still sure who we really feel. Well, we've got
Rockefeller
the
and the
we
Rockefellers
have a
and
name,
Rothschilds
first name.
are
and,
they're in control of the finance in this country. They pull the strings when it comes to banking. They do.
Really?
Yes, they do.
I
Those
guess,
families have had control of the
There's
banking.
been some documentation of this. So
Okay.
the book
All
Dark,
right.
Dark
Well, it may
Money
be- it
by
may-
Jane
it may be
Meyer
true.
totally
It may exactly be
substantiates
true.
that there are
Okay.
manipulations
Yeah, no, it's
happening.
But we have to-
manipulation.
But this is science. This is
is-
science, and it's definitely happening.
Yes.
Look on Google Scholar. Go to Google
Yeah,
Scholar
it's-
and look at weather
it's real.
modification. They're working to modify the weather, and of course, that's the military's bailiwick. They're going to say
all right,
that's
let me
our
just say it's-
responsibility.
And there's been I had Dane Wigington on my show, and he is a solar engineer. He worked with Bechtel. He lives off the grid up in Shasta. He has gone and knocked on the government's doors, and they slammed the door right in his face because they
And
don't
Jared
want to
Huffman
face
did the same-
responsibility. Jared Huffman did the same to me. I went in
They
front
call
of him.
people quacks.
I
You
went
even
yes, they do.
stated.
2 months ago. I
But
went.
look at HARP. HARP was an actual government program. What's happening is, and this is what Bucky said in 1982, we are entering a dark age. When Ronald Reagan got elected in 1981 and took the solar panels off the White House and went into cahoots with corporations, invited them in
Money.
to help write the laws, it was all about money, and it was about a legitimate belief that that Adam Smith thing, that corporations want to do what's right for people too. That's where the justification for that came from. And trickle-down economic theory, as it was explained to me by Buckminster Fuller, trickle-down economic theory was an indoctrination that went to every college and university in America, was teaching that in the 70s and the early 80s.
It still
It
goes
was
on.
the thing to teach because the corporations...
That's how we have accepted it. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter
Adam
what.
Smith's invisible hand of the corporations.
well,
All right, let's step back again. Let me get a few words in edgewise, ladies. Okay. Again, a lot of this is right now. What you're telling me would not exactly can be taken as quote scientific proof, which is always kind of a nebulous thing. But it is good to look at the citations and who said this and what person studied that. It really is good to do that. Maybe we might end up doing 2 months from now when we really harness our information. And I've been a person like yourselves, a very, I would say suspicious. Yes, that was what the word was on the tip of my tongue. To think in terms of what is the manipulations that do go on in our world. And I think there are some. I think that some of it maybe goes beyond when I hear my friends speak with each person as a cab driver. I mean, everybody has a story and everybody has a different opinion about how or why the world is messed up and or who is and or controlling it. Now, the HARP thing, very interestingly, about 10 or 15 years ago, I first heard about this, and I checked in with an engineering relative of mine, who's also a conscious environmental person, but comes in a heavy kind of nuts and bolts engineering background. So we went into it, and I don't say he did an exhausting search, but he did a search that, at least at that point, HAARP wasn't involved in spraying anything. It was this array of, radar type stuff that could indeed be effective. I mean, it didn't look really, it looked kind of, I tend to be skeptical about a lot of things that humans do to even improve what we might say is Bucky Fuller's concept of the original natural design of nature and human beings. I think we need to, in general, back off all kinds of elements where we want to improve nature or even save us from our own mistakes by making more mistakes.
Destroy the resources.
All right. So I'm from what we saw with my engineering background brother-in-law was that, it is what it is. We may not agree with what they're doing, but it didn't look to him that anything they were doing was really going to be severely or even modestly affecting the weather at that time. Okay, all right. Now we have those different opinions. We can try to arrange more facts if we could.
Today.
Let me say one more thing about the questions I have about the water in the bucket thing is where are these and I bet you there were even more elements than that, right? I mean, more compounds and stuff than that. So there's a lot. So even if we don't know for sure that they're floating down as a result of something a jet is pouring.
This is above the clouds. They spray above the clouds.
I know, but what ends up in the water?
Why is it in the water?
If it doesn't have to start from above the clouds to get up in the clouds. It can start right here on the ground. We have how many million vehicles every day with every compound being
Not
exhausted.
those specifically.
There are all kinds of heavy metals that come floating out of cars, catalytic, very much so. And even modern cars and Priuses.
I don't think it's the same chemicals.
Well, I don't know. Again, so this is sort of the question. I tell you what, lady. But let's think about this, because in a way, I also think about just if we were just Mr. and Mrs. Natural human beings, all of us, men and women, and we were embodying our lifestyle without this spraying. We have jet traffic that everybody goes on a vacation 3 or 4 times a year, hops on a plane to God knows what, and the standard fuel of jet fuel is a combination of naphtha and kerosene. It's called jet fuel number 1. That's what it burns. That in itself, I'm not 100% sure, but I would think that due to relative humidity, that could influence when these particles of exhaust are released.
They have containers in the bottom of the jets that the pilots actually, it's separate, and they press it and they let it go. I have seen documentaries about this.
Have you? All right. So there have been pilots who've been interviewed who've explained how it worked?
Are mandated to do it. I have talked to a pilot in my car one time, and they don't want to talk about it because they obviously are not educated about it, but they are mandated because it's a government. It's the FTF.
Do you think it just started 10 years ago? It's been going for 30 or 40 years? You don't probably know, do you?
Well, I don't know when it actually started, when they had the containers with the nanoparticles in the jets. I think it probably amplified when Monsanto got involved in it. That's my impression. So,
wow.
But when I went to, it's the government, But what I take this very seriously, because now that I really see the truth,
right.
I have to do what I have to do to get to stop it. I'll do whatever I need to help educate people about this. I mean, truthfully, it took me months to grasp the truth on this,
Okay.
especially when we're being contaminated and depopulation. Look at the weather all over the planet. Look at the extreme weather that's been going on. Do you pay attention to that?
I think I do, and I think I wonder why everybody pumps gas every day like there's nothing to it.
I don't
or
believe
climbing
it's
a-
just the gas.
Well,
I don't
right,
believe
so I
that
think
it
that's
is.
enough that we might question our own behavior
Well,
ourselves.
so I would like to take us back to one simple quote from Buckminster Fuller, and that is that the fossil fuel industry is committing the greatest crime ever against humanity by intentionally obstructing clean energy. He said that in 1982. And so a lot of this whole corporate fascination with the chemicals and keeping fossil fuels alive and finding ways to frack more cleanly rather than switch to solar, rather than switch to wind. These are the big issues that I think we need to be focused on now. And I do think that some of these things that are happening, the Green New Deal and the new Congress with the new women and diversity in our Congress could make some of these things change.
Yeah.
And I do think that the military is an extension of the president and the leaders who are there at the time. And what we need to know is how much we do not know. Mother
see,
Jones
that-
magazine, which
that's
is one of
huge.
the smartest
That's huge.
magazines in America, their backroom in the newsroom motto is, "It's worse than you think."
That's right.
The information that you get, now I know you're a very smart man and you are out there digging and trying to find information from wherever you can, but you have to realize there is a lot you do not know. The
course,
military
it's huge. I know.
invests,
All of
the
them
military
do.
and the
Yep.
corporations are investing fortunes. For instance, on the right, they invest a fortune in research to find out how to talk to people so that they'll vote against their own best interests. Right? That's an actual research practice every day with millions of dollars spent into talking to consumers and finding out what they really think.
Man's inhumanity to man.
Yes, and the man part is part of the problem. The women who are coming forward now are going to be the new leaders. I think you see Alexandria
Yes.
Cortez
Yes.
Ocasio,
she's
or is
out
it
there.
Ocasio-Cortez?
Every day
Shining
she's
armor.
out
They
there.
hate her. I hope she's got
Yes.
Secret Service
Yeah.
because she
Well,
needs
I'm
it.
just waiting. Well, I don't
She's
want.
the
We shouldn't talk
charismatic-
politics. But
She's the charismatic type that the right tends to do away with. She can be a Kennedy or a Martin Luther King if she's too charismatic.
Yes. Oh gosh. Anyway,
Talk about conspiracy theories.
yeah, but we just need to get educated and get on the same page so we understand the whole picture.
Well, I commend you for believing in what you believe in and then making it your mission. That's what Bucky said, that individual integrity was the secret to the future of humanity. And only if we decided to only go along with the truth, to research
Well-
and work until you have the truth, and then once you do, it is your obligation
Yes.
to speak it.
Absolutely.
It is an obligation to
And-
your fellow woman.
Yes,
kind
fellow
to speak
human
your
being.
truth.
I totally agree with you, and I guess I have a push because my ancestor was one of the forefathers in this country, and it's coming out big time in me.
Which ancestor?
Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. He actually was the one.
I actually heard that name before.
He was the designer of the Constitution. He signed it. He started the first Bible Society in America. He was an ambassador to France.
You feel you owe something back.
I do.
That's a wonderful thing.
And I even get goosebumps now because I realize that I am being pushed to do something here. And, not that I want to get into politics because I'll rip them apart.
Wow.
I'll rip them apart
Rip who
with my
apart? Anybody?
honest, no, not anybody. But the ones that are like, when I went in front of, for the second time, when I went in front of Huffman,
This is Congressman Jared Huffman. you're talking
yes,
about. Okay.
yes, I was appalled. He saw me coming, and I saw the look on his face, and I thought, oh. But I went up, I was very professional, and I said, here we are. I'm here to get this in the legislation. He goes, you and I are going to disagree. you and I are going to disagree. And I said, how can you deny the facts? I have the facts right here.
And these are the facts on what?
The chemtrails.
The chemtrails again.
The chemistry that's coming out of our water in Mill Valley.
Right.
He lives in Marin. Yeah. He says, you and I are going to disagree. And I,
So
Well,
let's get a
disagreement is okay.
scientific, let's get somebody to adopt us. Let's get my friend Mary Connolly, who's with the Lawrence Livermore Labs, to do some research into our water supply and see what's really happening. Because I don't know about you, but I use a Berkey water filter. I don't drink the stuff, whatever they're putting, whatever's
don't drink the
out
water.
there in the water.
I filter my
there are
water.
really wonderful filters now, and including
aqua-
fluoride you can get rid of, which is
yeah.
another
no, there's-
neurotoxin that's in our water supply.
Anyway,
So
it's
let's go back.
huge.
Let me
It's huge.
try to regain, but I don't have to. I'm enjoying this very much. So if you wanted a little fire, we've got some fire here.
I'm passionate
Good fire.
about this.
Well, you know
I
what?
can tell
Passion is the most
Are you
powerful
kidding?
force on
Are
earth.
you kidding?
When you say Waking Up with Cheryl, your show, you are inviting everybody to. Do you see your show as being more about finding the conspiracy going on, or is it a waking up to the power of people in the moment, their own selves, and shall we say, in the present, shall we say, to do something powerful or be alive and not be a victims? Is there a way of
That's
not
a
being
good
a
way of
victim?
putting it. That's a good way of putting it. But the basis is raising the consciousness. Raising the consciousness.
Of
With
consciousness
the
or of
consciousness,
facts
your
of
mindfulness,
scientific details or
your
what?
mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Which is also facts. That's all part of it. It's
Okay.
all, that's
Well-
my basis.
Well,
And it's raising the consciousness and mindfulness with a relationship with wealth and unconditional love. That is my brand,
all right.
basically.
All right.
So,
So yeah, if we have that, if we have this place on the planet Earth that we are at, that could be described as Pat was describing it to me as being going down the
Swirling the
drain.
drain.
And I'm saying, okay, well maybe it's like late in the fourth quarter, but who knows? Maybe there is
we never give up hope.
no. Of course, not.
Never
We're
give up
alive.
hope. Yes. But it's our responsibility
So
to
can I tell you what Bucky said?
Help.
This is, I think,
Go for
something
it.
to hold on to. Bucky said there would be an emergence, that we would evolve into a higher class species. So right now, humans are a class 2 species. A class 1 species is, for instance, a seahorse, which puts the good of the whole ahead of the good of the
Yes.
individual. They will gladly die for the good of the group.
Yeah.
And we're not quite that magnanimous
Oh,
yet.
please.
But he said we were
Some people do
evolving in that direction, but that getting there, that evolutionary leap that humanity would go through, would be an emergence through an emergency.
That's right.
And I think that emergency is what's beginning now. You see
Oh,
the
it's been
unrest,
going on.
you see it in the streets, you see
Oh, my
smart
God.
doctors like this woman coming forward and saying, there are things going on that we should know about, that we don't know about, because they don't want us to know about
That's
them.
right. That's
And
right.
we
Education.
are still in a dark age. So in 1982, Bucky said, we're moving into a dark age. And I said, I think this man is crazy because obviously we're so enlightened. We've been through the 60s and the 70s
you
and we're enlightened. I was all enlightened. I was, I thought the age of Aquarius was seriously coming. I thought we were going to be this sharing. So the basis of Buckminster Fuller's philosophy is we should all be working to make the world work for 100% of humanity.
That's right.
Through spontaneous cooperation,
Yeah.
without regard to politics or government or anything, through spontaneous cooperation to the disadvantage of no one and with no ecological harm. And the ecological harm is where and why the fossil fuel industry is going to be the centerpiece of this revolution coming. That it is our attack of the fossil fuel industry, our attack back upon them after their crimes against us for at least 35, 40 years of knowing full well that climate change was coming and even preparing their rigs to make them high enough so that they would outlive the the rising seas. They knew that, and now they're asking the government to help them pay for the retrofit. so that they can be ready for the climate change that they caused, knowing full well that they were, while they hired PR firms like Hill and Knowlton of New York City to forever scramble the science, create skepticism. The climate change deniers were born out of a public relations effort. And it's really sad that that's where we are. So this emergence through emergency is going to happen as a result of this crime against humanity.
Well,
And
it's
we're rising
happening.
up against
It's
it now.
happening.
And this is part of it.
It's
Well,
happening.
you're part of the
Let me
fossil
tell you
fuel
what I agree with
backlash.
and what maybe I disagree with. I agree, and I love the notion of spontaneous cooperation, not a cooperation enforced by the next government directive or whatever, but a spontaneous cooperation
We,
of
the
human
people.
beings simply obeying their own consciousness, listening, knowing
Finding
what-
their
this is
truth and speaking
finding the
it.
path.
We the people.
Now, what I kind of disagree with there is this notion that we see, and I said, our county, Marin, is I think currently doing a lawsuit against the
Fossil fuel
oil
industry.
companies, fossil fuel companies for misleading the people. But to me, I mean, I don't want to be a lawyer for the oil companies, but I just, don't we as humans have a certain responsibility? I mean, it's been no secret going back to the 1970s that the burning of carbon fuels was going to lead to this massive change in the atmosphere.
What I think, well, yes, but you have to realize the fossil fuel industry has been a publicly supported, subsidized, in the name of energy for all.
Fills up their tank with gas and goes on a trip.
But much more than that, we're still
corporations.
worldwide. There's $718 billion that are given to oil companies now to do more drilling, when that same amount of money could be going to solar companies to build more solar panels.
No, hold on.
Solar
All right.
gets a minor
All right.
percentage.
All right. This is very
the fossil
important
fuel
piece of
industry.
information. Let me get this piece of information. That sounds very important. 718 billion is going to fossil fuel companies
To help them from government, your tax dollars.
718 billion from the U.S.
Yes.
government.
No. This is worldwide. Money's
Globally.
for, this is the global number for this year for how much we as the people
of the
are
planet.
giving to the fossil fuel industry to help them drill us into oblivion.
Okay.
The
And so that-
ironies are absurd.
Okay. That's
I'm
very,
sorry, I'm
You know
losing my...
what?
it's all
One
right. It's
thing-
very interesting.
One thing that I'm learning from you about the fossil fuels and everything, and I appreciate that. And I was overwhelmed when I found out the truth about what's going on with
imagine.
the spraying. I truly was overwhelmed, and it's like, and now this is huge for the average person to handle.
Right.
I mean,
handling it
people
so
can.
well. I mean,
but
I'm not
see,
handling it. I just still want more.
You want more proof.
I want a teach-in that has representatives who've been turned to become good people to spill the beans. I want to hear
You
somebody.
need to watch some of my shows.
Well, what
you
about
know,
that
what-
documentary? What about the documentary about Kemp? Which is the good one? I watched a bad one. I mean, that's the problem, is that some
I
of
will
these
put it
people
together.
who are on the right track are so upset that they end up sounding crazy and they
Yeah.
end up presenting
Too
not such
emotional.
good. Exactly. and that is a challenge. And
Yeah.
there are places like IONS that actually teach how
Yep.
to be an effective activist by getting inside the head
That's
of the
right.
person you're talking to
Well,
and
it's-
getting them to
That's
believe.
an art. The communication is
yeah.
an
It
art.
is an art. And let's think
But it is overwhelming, for I think the average human being that isn't analytical. I just tend to be very analytical, and I want to dig until I get the truth.
I'm with you.
That's what I do in my show. I go right to the heart,
Well, that's good.
and that's
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
that's my MO.
Right.
But it's overwhelming when you think about the fossil fuel that's contributing and the geoengineering. It's coming from both, all angles, and it's overwhelming. And for somebody to think, an average person to think, "Oh my God, I'm going to die," they don't want. I'd say the responsible parties that are doing this, they don't want it to come out, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to freak out.
And I think it helps people to understand it if you consider the theory that it all began at some point with good intentions. The fossil fuel industry really did feel necessary for bringing energy to the whole world. The chemical industry really did think, remember Dow's Better Living Through Chemistry advertising of the 70s and 80s and 90s and beyond? We have been taught to believe that we can chemically and with these extracted energies somehow set the world right. And we can't. And that's what Bucky said about getting back
That's
to
right,
nature and
nature.
realigning ourselves with
Absolutely.
nature. So I do think we are going to get this crap out of the air in time. I think we're going to end up getting our
absolutely.
carbon numbers and our emissions down.
Nature is gonna,
Nature is going to take
Yeah,
over with or without
absolutely.
humans.
Nature is-
My 18-year-old daughter, who was the reason I quit everything to write this book at long last, came home from high school one day and said, Mom, I want you to stop worrying about the future of humanity. You know, because I talked to them their whole life about the future of humanity and that their generation was going to be key. She said, it doesn't really matter, Mom, because what I found out in science today, she was in an advanced environmental sciences class, I found out that
Gee,
once
where
the
did that come
humans, once the humans are gone, the Earth's going to be fine.
No!
The Earth will regenerate. The Earth
Oh
will come
my
back.
God.
And
Well,
she was
Mother
relieved.
Nature.
She was relieved.
totally. Yeah, I
And
think
it
so.
made me so
Based on-
sad to think that she was thinking that the end of the human race was
See,
a good thing.
And that's my fear for millennials, because they don't have a whole lot of hope.
No.
Not all of them. Not
know.
all of them. I mean, because there's a whole array of different mentalities. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, you know, and especially what's going on in the White House. I mean, anyway, don't get me going on that. But I'm, you know, it's dire.
We're at a
it's,
pivotal time for humanity, and the next, as it finally,
why I
as the
call my show
IPC,
Wake Up.
the International Panel on Climate Change, finally said we have 12 years. Now, I think that might be a bit of an exaggeration.
I think so.
I think unless we start turning a corner now,
Yeah.
we need to be at a place within 12 years that we cannot get to unless we start right now, and we are starting right now. The Green New Deal in Congress had
Yeah.
1,000 people line the halls of Congress today and demand from every congressman that they support this idea for a
Yes.
Green New Deal,
Yes.
which is not just about the environment, it's about environmental justice, and it's
Yeah.
about getting jobs for clean energy
Yeah.
to the people who have been disenfranchised, and it's about ending fossil fuel subsidies. I mean, there's a whole list of what they want to do, and it's basically realizing and recognizing that we need a mobilization the same as World War II, or the same as the last New Deal in the Depression era, in order to turn things around in time. It's also about reforestation, tree planting, requiring solar panels. California just passed a law last week that all new construction, all new high-rise buildings, everything that is built will
Solar.
have solar
Yeah,
panels, will
Governor
be solar
Brown
powered.
did that.
That's a
Jerry Brown
huge,
did that.
that's a huge
Yeah.
turning point. That's saying F you fossil fuels,
see, and
fossil
that's-
fools, as Bucky called them, fossil fools.
Fools,
Because
yeah.
even the fossil fuel industry is suffering from their own success.
All right, so we're actually, in a way, the planet is going through some
Convulsions.
catharsis. I will use
There
the
you go.
word.
It's the human beings on the
All
planet.
right, no, but we've reached this.
The women, at least.
We've got this level of success that's threatening to kill us all, right? It's this level of wealth, of manipulation and control of nature that is no longer accepting responsibility for the byproduct or the negative impacts. on
Never
our
did
human-
accept
But
responsibility. Never
point-
did
the
accept
point that I would
responsibility.
hope to make in with the Green New Deal, and I want to go back to Bucky Fuller, which, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I like that notion of, yeah, we should have this. We had World War II. We had this incredible spirit of, America came together. Even pacifists were ready to go out there and, they wanted to protect democracy across the planet. But what I think that we have to be careful if we keep looking for these solutions to be coming down the pike from the government until we recognize our own personal choices.
Well, now that's a big part of it. It is a big part of it.
The point of changing, one thing I think Kennedy referred to in one of his speeches when he talked about leadership, he didn't refer to any particular color or person or gender or anything like that. He said, we need your leadership. And he meant every human being in America.
I always come back.
Your leadership.
We the people.
Right,
we the people.
Right.
That's what
and
it's
a sense that an optimism that I think that needs to let go of this sense. I think Pat was getting at it too, that the Dow chemicals and the carbon fuels, they weren't all some malicious evil cabal set out to destroy the planet. They were people doing their job who thought that this was the path of progress.
Right.
And the path of progress is really the issue of where we're going, and if we're to like make it worse on future generations from our continuing mistakes of this generation, or are we going to start leaving a place where the future generations will have more of a chance? And that's, to me, it's about our use of our wealth, our blindness to plastics and everything from poly, and then growth.
The world's
in
waking
general.
up about that.
And
America's late on this one.
we
America's
are,
late.
but the world is late. But it's okay, I think, because this is where we're at.
And
We've reached this level of, from 1 billion or whatever it was in 1900. We just floating along the same level, and then suddenly we're just getting so successful.
There's 40 million people right here in the Bay Area.
And population's
it's
growing
worldwide.
worldwide.
8, almost $8 billion.
Yeah. So what we got here
population.
is a need for humanity to feel it in themselves, to know that
that's
the
the
path
key.
through to the future goes through every individual and the choices they make, including
Individual
how many
integrity.
children to raise.
We are a mermation of humanity. How we behave is what will happen. And so the personal responsibility thing is important. But what I've seen is that used as an excuse by the fossil fuel industry to continue what it is doing. So we're always told that, oh, well, you shouldn't drive your car, you should take public transportation, or you shouldn't use that plastic bag. But in fact, again, it is taxpayer dollars that subsidize these activities. We subsidize our own demise. Bucky's words, he always loved to rhyme. We subsidize our demise.
But
We're continuing to do so.
I think-
So we must force government to do the right thing. We can't totally ignore the government and pretend like it's all up to us.
What you said.
But it's
what you said about individually, it's extremely important to raise the awareness, the education around this, the spirituality, which no one talks about, around this, because that's how it's going to change, as we, the people, not leaving it totally up to the government. We, the people, have to take our power back. I'm saying that about politics too. We, the people, and spiritually speaking, when that's where I come from, is spiritually, we all have to work together, and we all have to be patient with one another to raise that consciousness. So you do your part, and then focusing on the solutions. Not the problem,
Very good.
but the
Yeah.
solution.
Well, that's a good. We
That's-
haven't got to too much of that yet.
Well,
but we're working on it, aren't we?
we're
We are.
solutions.
That is the point. As
Yes.
long as they keep the argument going about whether or not climate change is a real thing, or whether or not chemtrails are a real
it's a
problem,
real thing. It's a real.
but as long as they keep the argument in that space, we don't get to move on to the solutions.
Yeah, and we
So to
have
move on to the solutions,
people-
we have to declare as individuals, the debate's over. This stuff is for real.
Yep,
We need to start working on how do we convert to 100% clean energy, and there are organizations that have the plan to do that. Solutions, the solutionsproject.org out of Stanford, of all places. The fact that Stanford has allowed Mark Jacobson to do his work is amazing. He brought
Hey.
in 240,
You know what-
excuse me, let me just finish, 240 graduate level engineers did an analysis of every state in America and went and found out state by state how would we convert this state to 100% clean energy? What percentage wind? What percentage geothermal? Do they have some other kind of water availability? Is this a solar state? Is this a wind state? Where do we put the wind? And where do we, and they've mapped it out. So we can make this transfer to 100% clean energy by following these plans. So the technology exists, the plans exist, but until they can find a way to meter the sun and the wind, the fossil fuel industry will not allow it to happen. And because they own our Congress, they own our Senate, they own our president, through the Koch brothers and others, Koch brothers, largest fuel company on the planet. Because they own our government, they are blocking development of clean energy. The fact that California has revolted and is coming through with things like mandatory solar on all buildings is making the government really mad.
Well,
So Buckminster Fuller predicted that America would fail. This was his prediction.
Well, it is
and that we
failing.
would break into a series of nation states, and the South will go with the South and the East Coast. And he recommended that California go with Mexico and Alaska, Oregon and Washington, and we create a Pacific Rim from which we can rule the world. That was his recommendation.
Excuse me
Wow,
for laughing,
that's.
But I mean, the high-minded visionaries and they are. I mean, he might
it
be
was
right.
he was
He
thinking out
might
loud.
be right.
He was thinking out loud.
Utopian.
He was thinking out loud.
I know.
Right?
It's.
I wanted to say about Stanford is that I had a professor that started the forgiveness classes at Stanford. He was on my show.
Forgiveness
Fred
for who?
Luskin.
For who?
Humanity, forgiving. I mean, it's so important to forgive people, so you're not.
God, was
in
that
their
someone from the
power.
fossil fuel industry? Forgive us. Forgive us for
No,
exploiting you all these decades while we got
I
our
only
profits.
made that reference because
And while we
of
lied,
Stanford.
the point is the crime was the lie. The crime was hiring a public relations firm and saying, we need to continue skepticism about this science, even though we believe in it and we know it's happening,
don't
in
know.
order to
I
keep
just-
our industry going. That's a fact. It's
just-
very well
it really
documented.
feels-
Well documented. Well documented.
I don't think that any human being with any real intelligence could be swayed by that document. I think that they've
What document?
any document that the oil industry, people know that burning oil, burning carbon, that's
same-
common knowledge going way back to the 1970s.
Right. We're on the same path as
And-
cigarettes
and-
and tobacco. It's a very similar path we're
Right.
on, and we are not there yet.
There's a heck of a lot of efforts to do, but to me, to get into this thing that poor victims, we were just taken by these companies. My vacation to Tahoe. I've got to run down to. I mean, we live a lifestyle that even in the 1960s, our own parents. I mean,
But we'd be driving solar-powered cars if we hadn't bowed to the pressures of the fossil fuel industry in the 1980s and the 1990s, and then allowed them to keep the reins in their hands as far as running our government. We would have solved this a long time
I
ago.
have to go.
We've got 2 minutes, Cheryl. You want to just
Give us a closer. Give us a closer.
breathe
Come
for
on.
2 more minutes?
Let's hear
And
your-
because
hear your
you
pitch.
have it because you were kind of knocking on the door, and my thing is once again is I feel like we do not need to diminish our own the responsibility and power go hand in hand, and if we are not afraid
He's
of
a
the
softie. He's a softie.
I guess I am. But I think that this World War II that some of us would have liked to have ignited, I don't think it's going to get anywhere until we have this sense that it's me and that I'm not going to be judging my neighbors to the left or to the right. I am going to live a life that's going to, and it could be more.
We
way
all
more
lift each
fun.
other up. We all lift each other up. When you see your neighbor putting out his green can and his recycling, when you see other people doing good things in the environment, cleaning up the oceans or whatever, we respond to that. So that, you're right, that positivity that we all do together, that has to be our
That's the most
mermation.
important.
Our mermation, not the negative.
And let's not get into this. Here we're all
Key.
talking about consciousness and waking up, and we're also deeply concerned. We're worried. We're anxious. We have this
Yes,
thing.
yes.
Wait, three of us actually, we do.
A yoke. We're heavily yoked.
Right.
We're heavily yoked.
So as we wrap
just
this up,
keep
Cheryl,
focusing.
help us. Just you release that weight too, and let's.
I'm all good with this, and I know that spiritually speaking, that we're in the right place at the right time, and there's solutions that we're all going to be part of. You are part of, I'm part of, and you're part of. And that's the key, and we just keep spreading this education to humanity, to everyone around us and beyond, so we can make these changes. So we can get Mother Earth back to a healthy place, so we'll be more healthy.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we can live, like my next guest, we can live to be 120.
Cheryl and Pat, I think we need to fire up ourselves and the younger generation to really believe, like it, with a sense of fire, that we can make a remarkable transition before this century is over, within a generation. If we light this fire, if we believe and focus and have this sense that we are going to do it, without enemies, if we don't mind, because we really are, the whole message is a unity.
Two words from Bucky that sums it
Yeah.
up. Conscious evolution.
That's what it's about.
So you just remain conscious as
Yes.
you're evolving, and
Yes.
keep evolving and keep remaining conscious about your evolution, and we'll get there.
amen. Let's leave it at
We'll
that.
get there. High
I gotta
five.
go.
High five.
I've got another show.
She's gotta
I've
run.
got my show.
Go slow.
That was fun. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh my
All
Thank
right.
you. I still didn't get to tell you about my book, though.
I know.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
on Amazon.
Have to do it
The
again.
girl from
Got it.
Spaceship
Have to
Earth.
do-
It's on Amazon. It's got all 5-star reviews. I'm really looking forward to a bad review. I have not received one in the entire year and a half since it's been
Here's
published.
Bucky's final comment. Our survival does not depend on political or economic systems, but on the courage of individuals to speak the truth.
Amen. Yes.
That's right on the
Yes,
front of my
yes,
bookmark.
yes,